takeandtalkpics.com. I'm Rob Kruger, and this is episode 89 with fine art photographer Nat Coalson.
The idea of mindfulness and conscious intention, actually thinking about what you're doing. What is the most important practice to my photography? The answer is contemplation.
Today's featured guest is Nat Coalson. Nat, are you ready to share with Photo World today?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Nat runs his business here in the U.S. based out of Colorado, as well as a studio in Hinckley, England. Nat starts with photography, both digital and traditional processes, but then works with mixed media to finalize his art. Some works are embellished with paint, resin, or foil, while others are produced with a combination or completely different material. His abstract work is sought after for private decor and commercial presentation. Beyond the mixed media, Nat also has pictorial journeys, where his location-based fine art photography shine. Nat, welcome to Take and Talk Pics.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, and maybe you can expand a little bit, because this is a very brief introduction. You're in two locations a world apart from one another, and you are doing a couple different things. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about you and your business?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one of the key phrases that would describe my approach to business is diversify.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Colorado and lived there, most of my adult life until moving to England after I got married. My wife is British, and so I moved to the Midlands of England in 2012. And so I've been keeping both businesses going, both based in Colorado and in England. And just like I'm sort of splitting my business between two locations, I also kind of operate on two distinct bodies of work in terms of photography.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my primary focus is on abstract mixed media, like you described, and I aim to make photographs that are truly abstract, straight out of the camera. Those pictures I very often will print on canvas and then hand embellish with acrylic or texturing mediums or some other types of process to create these kind of mixed media works. Those abstract pieces are mainly designed as decor. So I sell them to private collectors for homes and offices, and also a large part of my business is focused on the hospitality industry, selling original fine art to hotel properties.
Very nice.
So the other part is the travel-oriented stuff, the location-based work that you mentioned. I travel a lot. My wife travels a lot too. That's actually how we first met, was on mutual business trips. And as we travel around the world, I'm always, taking different types of images, and it depends on what I'm shooting for how the work would be produced and ultimately marketed. So I've got a body of work at pictorialjourneys.com that is, you could call it travel photography, but it is also designed as fine art. I have had some success selling those images for publication and calendars and postcards and those types of things. But in general, my main focus for my work is to print large pictures to hang on the wall, whether it's abstract or travel.
Right, and everything you're making is photography based or begins with photography. And with your career, I mean, what sparked your interest enough to actually pick up a camera and say, let's do this, let's make a photography career happen?
Well, I've always been an artist. When I was in high school, I got into graphic design, and through that ended up doing a lot of work in digital imaging. This is in the early 90s. And working a lot with other people's pictures, both in digital pre-press and graphic design, and ultimately in internet and web development. I've always been interested in photography and in photographs, and I always did photography kind of as a hobby since I was young. But in terms of actually turning it into a career, in all honesty, it was digital that did it for me. When digital capture finally became viable at a professional level, at that point I was all in.
Yeah.
It's the idea to be able to capture, edit, and print the work, from start to finish all myself is, that was the game changer for me.
Very nice. Yeah, the digital revolution changed a lot of lives.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
But so it's a little bit ironic maybe that these days I'm equally as interested in, these other more traditional kind of hands-on processes as well. So
Well,
my photography is all digital, but I love to see what else I can turn it into
right.
after the fact.
Yeah, I mean the mixed media stuff is pretty hot, and there are some people who just get it. I am not one of those people. I can't figure it out. Like if somebody challenged me to make something, it would look awful, and your stuff is like this awesome look and feel, and I want to see these things in person, and I think that's the real drive behind having hands-on work involved with it, because you have to see it before you. Online only does so well to see a good display of it. So, I mean, it's not like a traditional photograph where you can see it and get a good sense for what it'd look like in print. So, I mean, these things just, I don't know, I'm just imagining the texture and the feeling they would have on these.
And that raises an interesting point too, that's been one of the challenges I've faced in marketing this
Mm-hmm.
work, that, to show it on a website or social media sharing, it just doesn't really quite get it across. So I'm finding that to actually get the work on the wall, in front of somebody, they a lot of this stuff people really do need to see in
Yeah.
person to really understand what it's all about.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, maybe that is one of the biggest challenges, or something you've been working on overcoming over the past few years. But can you share with Photo World something you think of as maybe a small failure moment or a learning moment where you tried something and it wasn't working out, but you know better now?
Well, when I read this question, when you emailed it to me, I I had a hard time choosing, because in all honesty, I am a big believer in failure.
Yeah.
That, if you're not failing, then you're not trying hard enough. And, I've had the failures that I've had usually had to do with, um, having something figured out wrong, or occasionally being pressed for time or budget, and trying to be clever and rig something that maybe wasn't the best solution. And so the example that I came up with was a show that I did here, actually one of my first major shows here in the UK a couple of years ago. I had hired a bunch of those felt panel display boards
Mm-hmm.
to put in a hotel reception room. And the company that I hired these display boards from insisted that I absolutely could not put any nails, screws, tacks, hangers, no kind of thing can puncture these. So I racked my brain literally for weeks trying to figure out how to hang my canvas pieces on these felt boards
Right.
without leaving any holes in them. So I came up with this brilliant idea to take strips of Velcro and super glue them to these hanging tabs, and then had these little plastic hooks on these Velcro tabs, and
Uh-huh.
the glue seemed to stick pretty well, and the Velcro stuck perfectly to the panels. And so I went around and hung 20 of these things using all these plastic things that I'd made. And during the reception, one by one, they started falling off
Oh
the
no.
panels. And so, yeah, I mean, when the first one fell, my heart sank, as you can imagine.
Right.
But, and in the end, I think maybe 4 or 5 of them fell off because the glue didn't hold.
Yikes.
So it was a good idea in principle, but the execution of it was I would call definitely a failure. But it turned out in a good way, because even I wasn't fully aware of how bulletproof and durable these things are.
Right.
But literally, imagine a 30 by 40-inch canvas falling 4 feet down onto the floor,
Oh,
and
jeez.
not a single one of them were damaged.
Well, they must
I
have
mean,
fell just right, because if you would have hit a corner, that could go. I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
crazy.
but
Those are tightly
I'll tell you,
stretched, you know?
yeah. Well, and I build them to be super durable anyway.
Hmm.
But you can imagine, with a room full of people, many of whom I hadn't met before, going around and talking about my work, and one by one they're just dropping on the floor. So
It's performance art. So
that was a fail. And so, you know what? To solve the problem in the end, I took a handful of nails and went around and just banged the holes in the panels anyway.
And nobody was the wiser afterwards. You
Nope,
just
nope. Took them back, and you couldn't even tell. So
yeah, you got to get things done, and sometimes it's better to beg forgiveness than ask permission. So
absolutely,
totally works.
I tried to do it their way.
Well, when we're running a business, and you kind of have two fronts to yours, and definitely two locations you're running out of, so it can be double the difficulty. We have these business habits. Some are good, some are totally awful. Can you think of one bad business habit that you'd like to break?
This one was easy to answer. I tend to procrastinate when it comes to reaching out to make direct contact with prospective buyers. Even if I know who they are and what they're all about, and I know they would like my work, to pick up the phone or even sometimes to send an email is really hard for me. And I've struggled with this. I've been self-employed now for almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And even before that, as a freelancer, to try and sell myself or sell my work, sell my services is really difficult for me because of making that first pitch, or making the first introduction. And I don't know if it's all down to fear of rejection or just a general nervousness, but it is a bad habit that I have. Even if I've identified a target, sometimes it takes me a long time to get around to contacting them, just because I'm nervous about having them say no, I guess.
I think it's because we know the feeling of the other side of it. Like, you could walk in someplace and you're looking for something specific and you're ready to buy it, but the second somebody walks up and starts asking you, "Oh, can I help you with anything? Do you need this?" And it's like, "Get away from me. I don't like salesmen. Get away." And you suddenly turned off. Like, I came in to get something I needed anyways. Like, why am I feeling awkward about getting it now? Even if it's the right audience, yeah, it's hard to pitch. "So you're going to give me money and this is what's going to happen." And it gets a little uncomfortable.
Well, I think it makes it even harder when it's your own work that you're pitching.
Oh, yeah.
If I was selling somebody else's product or service, I mean, I wouldn't be so emotionally invested in it. But for a long time, I've recognized that, the work that I make, I do it because I'm really passionate about it.
Yeah.
And, the idea that somebody wouldn't like it or wouldn't want to buy it, I mean, that's a hard thing to get past.
For sure.
And so, I've read a couple of really good books about, the art of persuasion and such. But, in the end, it's all about these relationships that you build. And so, I've learned that the first time I contact somebody, I am absolutely not going to try and sell them anything. I'm about, tell them who I am, what I do. And if there's a fit, if there's some professional chemistry there, then, it's something to build on.
Yeah.
But this stuff takes time, I mean, there's almost nobody that I could call out of the blue and say, "Hey, I've got some art. You want to buy some?" and have them go for it. And I think it's the same with photographic services or anything really, that, people, of course, they have to want it, but even more than that, they want to work with you. They want a relationship of some, they want to do business with you. So I'm getting better at making that first step and, taking the pressure off a little bit, that I don't have to sell them something today.
Yeah, a little great ball of value for you, photo world out there. Just, the relationship is so key, because if you're already in front of somebody who's a potential client, there's a reason. They're already looking for what you offer. So you're halfway there. It's the relationship that's going to make you the game changer, because the reality is there's a lot of people who can do similar things as photographers, and you got to find your way to set that apart, whether it's style or personality or a combination of things. Like, man, it's so big. It's so big. We got a really wide range of listeners out there. I mean, there are some that are just getting ready, kind of like, what, maybe I want to make that transition to a full-time photographer. There are others who've been doing it for several years, and even those super seasoned photographers who are getting ready to retire and looking back on their careers. We got a ton of different people. But if you had to figure out one thing that could lead to growth and success in a business, regardless of any level, what's one thing you could recommend?
Well, it gets back to those relationships. You have to be willing to work with people. None of us can exist in a vacuum or a bubble, and it's a hard thing for photographers and artists of all kinds, because in a lot of ways, artists are sort of independent and, maybe even a little bit, introspective or antisocial in terms of, we like our work and we like to do it and we want people to love it and buy it. But at the end of the day, if you're going to make it as a career, then the relationships in a lot of cases is even more important than the work itself. Because like you said, there could be a lot of other people out there doing work that's just as good or possibly even better. The reason they're going to want to work with you is because of you.
Right.
And you have to cultivate those relationships. You have to find the right people who have a shared vision, and a similar way of looking at things. And that, we call this the worldview in kind of marketing speak.
Yeah.
You want people that share your worldview. And if you find somebody that shares that worldview, then getting a conversation going with them should be pretty easy, because you can talk about almost anything. But the idea is that ultimately you want them to want to work with you because of you, not because even of what you're selling. It all comes down to those relationships.
I love it. And it's so true. And maybe this is it. Maybe that was the aha moment when you started realizing that relationships are so key. And maybe not, but could you share with us maybe an aha moment, that time when you just said, I'm going to try this, and boom, a light went off. You were so ready, and it's like, oh my gosh, why haven't I been doing it like this forever? And I'm never going to do it differently now.
Well, actually, my understanding of the importance of relationships has happened very slowly and, with a lot of resistance on my part, because I always wanted to believe that if you make something great, people just buy it. And learning that has taken a long time. On the other hand, in the development of my own work as a photographer, there was a moment, or maybe a period of a few days or a week, where things definitely sort of gelled, and that moment came for me after another photographer buddy of mine and I spent a month in New Zealand. This is in 2009. We went over in what it was the fall or the autumn in New Zealand, springtime in North America. And we spent a month photographing all around both islands of New Zealand. And we rented a camper van and slept in it most nights and drove from place to place. And literally, we shot every single day from sunrise until sunset for 30 days.
Wow.
And it was exhausting. And sometimes it was miserable. But at the end of that, I had developed some aspects of my work and probably developed some skills and some new ways of seeing that I didn't realize until just 2 weeks after we got back from that trip. I took another trip to Northern California to shoot the redwoods and the rhododendrons north of San Francisco around Eureka area. It was on that trip in Northern California that I suddenly realized what I had learned in that 30 days in New Zealand. And things about, personal style, personal vision, what I'm trying to do with a camera, what I care about in pictures, what I don't care about, all of that came together as a result of this, 30-day immersion. But again, it wasn't until I took another trip where things just really started clicking for me.
Yeah, that's crazy that, you're looking at it and hey, I got this month. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be draining. We're going to do a ton of stuff. And you feel like you're doing it. You're on. And then you go somewhere else and you're like, hang on a second. Wait, why didn't I? Oh, man. Now I get it. I get it, But it's good to get it sometime, then never understand where you're at with it or what you want out of all of that. And it's just, I'm a little bit jealous. I need a friend like yours to, want to go do that kind of a trip, because that sounds awesome. Man, it sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it was good.
And,
well, I'd recommend it to anybody. If you can carve out, and even if it's not 30 days, if you can do a week or even a full day, just to be able to focus entirely on your photography, and then to go back and look at it with a critical eye as if it's not even your own work, you start to understand things about your work that you can't get it any other way. Yeah. And this goes regardless of what type of photography you do.
Yeah.
You need to be able to evaluate your work as if it's not your own.
And, that kind of leads pretty well into the next thing when we are under the microscope and people are looking at us and seeing what we're doing. And every once in a while, we get these little moments of validation where it's like everything we've been doing makes sense to somebody else. And we have this moment where it's like, hey, you know what? I did it. I kind of made it today. This is a good success for me. And, if you had one I made it moment, that'd be great. We'd all be done. You'd retire and somehow it all worked out. But the truth is there's 10,000 of these throughout a career where it's just these little victories that are the stepping stone to the next bigger victory. So can you recall one story, one time when you had an I made it moment as a photographer?
Well, I can say for sure that I've never felt that. Even when I've had some nice success and I've accomplished something, or even when other people think I've done something notable, I have such high standards and, so many things that I want to do that, I don't really base my feelings of success or failure on outside factors or events. So I'm always asking myself, have I done my best work? Have I accomplished what I set out to do? And like you said, it's a series of events. It's a bunch of stepping stones that sort of link together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still so much I want to do. But in terms of, a moment where I felt like I was making progress, which is probably the most important thing, to actually see that you're actually moving forward. Obviously, being approached by Wiley and Sons publishers, I think that was in 2008 when they asked me to do my first Lightroom book. And so, securing my first major book publishing contract, that was really exciting, and that felt like a big accomplishment. And I went on to do 4 more books on Lightroom and did another book for Wiley on nature photography, and those all felt good and felt like stepping stones. I think in the end, it took doing a few versions of the Lightroom books to realize that writing software manuals was not the future that I wanted for myself. Mm-hmm. And obviously with something like Lightroom or any software that's continually updated, it's a never ending thing. Right. And so I actually decided to stop writing about Lightroom. And, the nature photography book that was also by Wiley, it's called Nature Photography Photo Workshop. That one was a little bit more on track with my agenda in terms of sharing creative vision, sharing technique, how to make great pictures. Because I really believe that the equipment doesn't matter, the software doesn't matter, the computer doesn't matter. What matters is what's inside you and what's in your head and your own vision and how you can create pictures regardless of the tools that you have.
Yeah. I totally agree with that because I tell my students all the time, I'm like, you guys got to just know your gear because you can do so much more than you think you can. You're restricted with this mindset of, oh, it's not as good of a camera. I don't have as many megapixels, which are, totally ridiculous gauge. And, oh, I don't have that lens or this lighting. It's like you have opportunity to make what you have work in your favor. So focus on that and pursue that because you can really perfect your abilities with that level. And then you can work your way up to whatever you feel is the next thing as far as gear goes. It's not gear. Give somebody a camera. They should be able to work their way with what they're given rather than, being stuck and restricted by it.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
So, Nat, during your career so far, both the more fine art travel photography kind of thing you're doing with the pictorial journeys or, your abstract mixed media, what's the best advice that you've ever received in this?
Well, I actually took a workshop around 2007 from John Paul Caponegro, who I had, known of his work and kind of looked up to him for a long time. He's a digital guy through and through, and he led a fall colors workshop that I went to, and the advice that he had for me after looking at some of my portfolio images was that I should study painting to help with the abstract, the development of the composition, of the subject matter, of the themes, that to study a different kind of art can really inform your development as a photographer. And it was on that same workshop, actually, that I finally came to understand how important it is to write about your own work too. And, I think this applies regardless of whatever kind of photography you're doing. It's not just for fine art. It could definitely apply for commercial work as well. That to improve your work, you have to understand where you're coming from and what are your motivations and what are you trying to get out of it. And sometimes journaling and writing and, putting things in words can be hugely helpful for pushing the visual criteria.
Yeah, I mean that practice will help devise purpose for what you're doing. So I mean it can kind of be a culmination of these ideas and sketches, and then a production of work to really meld well into the idea you wanted to originally express. And man, I am a victim of that. I hate writing. I'm such a lazy bum when it comes to that. I really should get more into it. And I know the value of it. I hear it all the time from business, success stories and entrepreneurs and just people who are really pursuing something of a higher level for themselves or with what they're doing. Writing is a key thing because it lets the thoughts stop mixing up in your head and lay them out a little bit for you and organizes things differently. And then you can see it. And us as visual people, we need that seeing it in front of us again.
Well, a lot of people that I work with in my workshops or my private instruction have the same response, that they really don't like to write, don't want to write. A lot of that probably comes down to a lack of confidence as well.
Yeah.
But if somebody's thinking about maybe just keeping a journal about their photography, you can do it on your iPhone, you can do it on your computer, you can do it in a little notebook with a pen. I mean, it doesn't really matter how you do it, and you don't have to show it to anybody either. I mean,
Right.
This is just for you. It doesn't have to be, perfect or super clever or anything. The idea is that you get your ideas into a different form. And I've found that Evernote is hugely helpful.
Oh yeah.
For journaling, and just if I have an idea, I'll just pop open Evernote on my phone and just write 2 or 3 words, and I'll come back and look at it later. And you can keep little notebooks of all your different projects you're working on or different ideas that you want to develop, or people who are really in the educational mode of learning new things. Obviously you got to capture these ideas, otherwise they're gone.
I was just going to ask, do you have an app or an internet resource that Photo World can benefit from knowing about? And Evernote is a great one. And
Evernote's great for photography.
Speak to text, oh my gosh. We have no reason why we can't get something written down. It's crazy.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. It doesn't actually have to be writing or typing for that matter. The idea is that you're using words.
Yeah.
And this all can feed into the creation of an artist statement or, even your About Me page on a website, that you have to be able to clearly describe what it is you do and why. And if you don't care about what you're doing, then why would anybody else? And I think to be able to put it into words, it not only helps explain it to other people, but it actually helps you develop the work itself.
Yeah.
I mean, your photography will improve if you learn to write about your photography.
Absolutely. I mean, just getting it down somewhere, documented, huge.
Yep.
Huge value right there, Photo World. Take that with you. If that's the only thing you walk away with today, my goodness, that'll be huge. So, get going with it. But we're about to wrap it up here. I just got a couple more things I wanted to talk to you about. And one of them is just kind of either a recent or an upcoming project that you have in the works that you're really excited about. Can you share something with us?
Sure. I'm into printing on wood these days. I've got several different bodies of work that I've been developing based on using digital printing on different materials. And these days I'm finding nice sheets of plywood with different types of grain patterns and such, and marrying those up with different images and, having them printed large on big flatbed printers, and then layering that with epoxy resin.
Wow.
Which, just makes amazing presentations. So I've been really inspired by some mixed media work by people who also work, mainly with photography and digital images. And one of them actually lives in Colorado, in Boulder, near where I grew up. Bonnie Lotka is her name. And she's done some collaborations with another lady, Dot Kraus. And they have been, giving me a lot of inspiration in ways that you can take a digital image and turn it into all kinds of other things. So yeah, I'm excited about materials. I'm really a designer at heart, and I love working with different materials and different textures and surfaces, and seeing how things can sort of come together in the end.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And hopefully we'll see some of that stuff up soon on your site or your blog of just
Hopefully you'll see it in person.
yeah, yes, to get the full effect, the real one.
Yeah.
I could use an excuse to go to England. That sounds good.
Yeah. Well, I got a show opening in London next month.
There you
in
go.
November, I'm actually doing an abstract show in the city.
The European listeners, you're closer than us USers over here, but make it out there. You got a cool show to see. That sounds awesome. And Nat, before we really wrap up here, can you share with Photo World one parting piece of guidance, and then the best way that we can get in touch with you, whether it be your website or some sort of social media, and then we'll say goodbye.
Absolutely. Now this gets back to one of your earliest questions on the list, and this kind of goes as my quote or my mantra that I live by, and this is the parting piece of guidance, and that is, do your own thing. Don't try to be all things to all people. You can't do everything, especially in business. You have to make hard choices about what matters the most. So do what you really love. You got to find your true passion and pursue that. You got to follow what you really believe in. Don't follow somebody else. You can always change your mind later, and certainly you will. But for today, focus on what matters the most to you, and always stick to that. And then to reach me, the best way always is through my website at natcoalson.com. That's natcoalson.com. I'm on all the social media as well, but you can get there through my website.
And then Photo World, we'll have all of Nat's social links and his 2 websites up there, so you can find them through that on the show notes page. Just type in Nat on the search bar in takingtalkpics.com. If you can't find them directly, we'll have it all right there for you. But Nat, I cannot thank you enough for your time today and sharing such great value. Photo World thanks you, and happy shooting.
You're very welcome. Thank you.